It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for my gamers. Would you be one? Could you be one? Shout about thunder, but don't despair. This colony's breeding great robbers. Would you be one? Could you be one? If the 80% mortality rate works for you, for a few bucks a month you can sign up and have the Hobbs kill you. So let's make the most of another Sunday. Brew up some coffee and play it my way. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my gamers? Won't you please, won't you be my gamers?
All right, everyone. Welcome to Mr. Hobbs' Gamerhood. I am Jason Hobbs, and we are going to have the pre-show, and then we're going to have a podcast show, and then we'll have a post-show. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask it up. And without further ado, I will tell you who we got with us today, and it is Rob Conley. Rob, how's it going, bud?
All right.
Great.
Hope everybody is staying safe and doing the best they can.
I appreciate that. I know I am. How are you staying safe?
Yeah. I'm lucky I live in a rural town, so we've been lucky. All consider. A couple hundred cases, well, low hundreds cases, so knock on wood, it will stay that way.
No kidding. So did you just said how many, like you've been doing the podcast rounds, how much stuff are we going to go over that you've already gone over on all these other shows when you look at the outline?
I'm good. I can talk about this stuff. I'm a geek, like you. I can talk about this stuff all day. And it's different with every person, so it's all good.
It is. I completely agree with you. So do you want to maybe just for a second tell maybe these people hanging out on Twitch who you are?
Well, my name is Robert Conley. I've been playing RPG since I was in junior high school, since 1978. I was wargaming for a year before that. So I was not in the publishing for a long time. I did do things like help organize a gaming club in college. I did a few live action role playing events in the 90s, and then around the early aughts, the internet allowed me to connect with some people in the gaming industry, including Bob Bledsaw Sr., the guy who has actually founded Judges Guild along with Bill Owens, and he hooked me up to some of the projects we're doing, and that's that bit by bit, piece by piece, book, article and book I wrote. I slowly bootstrap myself into being an independent publisher, which is what I've been for the last 10 years, which is Bat in the Attic Games, and I primarily specialize in sandbox adventures and sandbox settings, formatted, what I call hex crawl formatted setting, numbered hex grid, and the locations are key to the hex grid. And for some reason, I've also found myself writing rules, so that's what I've been doing lately.
Oh, that sounds great. So it doesn't look like we got a ton of people in chat. It doesn't surprise me. This isn't necessarily a hot time to be hanging out in the Twitch. So we may get into some of that stuff and cover it with the show. I know that it's Monday tomorrow and I got to get up early. So without further ado, we will get going. So it's going to be exactly the same. I'm just going to start recording on Cast is the only difference. And then I'll say the same thing. I'll do an introduction, and then it'll just be a conversation, not as formal as this just was. Just like say whatever you feel like saying, man. Don't be concerned. So you got to take a drink of water or anything? Or are you ready? All right, let's do this thing. Hey everybody, welcome to Hobbs and Friends. I am your host, Jason Hobbs, and today, as every other day on Hobbs and Friends, I have a fantastic guest and one with infinite patience. It seems like you have to have infinite patience if you want to be on Hobbs and Friends, because I'm about as disorganized as it can get. So I have a blogger, a designer, a hex guy, one of the hex lords is what we would call you in some places. Anyway, without further ado, Rob Conley. Rob, what is up, my man?
Well, I have a Kickstarter. It is basically, for those who are familiar with my work, my first independently published project with the Majestic Waterland supplement. And, it's I have run the Waterland since uh, the early 80s, 82. And so whenever I ran a fantasy setting, whether it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, GURPS, Fantasy Hero, Fantasy Age, I always used the same setting and build on that, and just translate, you know, whatever stuff I have in the setting into the system I was using at the time. And with the Majestic Waterland supplement, I kind of returned back home to uh, to the classic editions and wrote it with using swords and wizardry as the foundation. I wrote a set of rules to accompany the setting information because I would think it would be nice to have a supplement that both is immediately useful, like here's some classes, here's some magic items, here's some creatures, along with reading about the Majestic Waterland. So I didn't stop there. I kept running more campaigns, like I normally do. And so a couple years later, I found myself with a whole bunch of additional material. It's still Swords and Wizardry based, but they also function as its own system. So I started putting the extra work into them, into making them polish for uh, uh, publication. And the problem is that there's a lot of nice systems out there. Old School Central is one of the newer ones, ranging all the way back to the original Basic Fantasy by Chris Goneman and Osric by Matt Finch and Stuart Marshall. So, rather than try to compete as just another system, one thing I noticed was that everybody, they may draw most of the materials from, say, Old School Essential, Swords and Wizardry, um, or Black Hack, or whatever, but they will also then take a lot of materials from other sources they find useful, and it's a huge variety of what people do this. So I want to be part of those other things that people incorporate into their campaign. And if they run my whole game as a complete system, then so be it. Great. That makes me happy. But like I said, I want to be part of the other things. So I am going to release it as a series of supplements. But I realized that okay, so for the people who are going to run it as a system, they need some kind of overview to tie it all together. So that's where I came up with an idea of writing a set of basic rules, level 1 through 5, but has all the things you need to run a campaign, such as character creation, combat, monsters, spells, treasures, a bit of referee advice, and then publish that so that you can see how to use all the other supplements together. And that came up first in what I was working on, and so I wanted to do a really nice job getting it edited. I had a cover artist in mind who's named Richard Luschek, who does the Harn illustration, which you can see some of the Harn stuff behind me. Um, and I inquired, and he was available, so I commissioned some covered art. But the expenses were a little bit more than what my month-to-month revenue can handle, so I founded a modest Kickstarter to help fund that. it's funded and it's going pretty good.
That's great, man. We will get deeper into that and maybe do a deep dive, but I like to start the show off with just like kind of an even better introduction about who you are and maybe how we're connected or why I even had you on the show. Obviously, being in the scene, as a blogger and as all the things that you do, you're obviously one of the premier people to get on the show. So I really appreciate you coming on. But when I think about you, obviously the Bat in the Attic blog, which you talk a lot about how to do hex crawls. On my show Hex Talk that I did with some other guys, I don't know if you've ever heard of the podcast, but we have talked about your stuff before and ways to make a hex crawl. That's what that whole podcast about, is running hex crawl games. So that's a pretty cool thing. Yeah, check it out. You can listen. You can hear us mention your blog and say how awesome you are. So along with, I would say, what are there three main people back in the day? You, the Alexandrian, and Welsh Piper, really all great hex resources on blogs. So
Yeah, they're great guys.
yeah, I would say those are the best ones in my opinion. There's better ones, but so what about this Points of Light? I see that's like one of the first things that you actually published, and that was for Goodman Games.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So what happened there was I just come off the Necromancer game Waterlands box set, and even back in the day, even back then, it was expensive. It was $70, a pretty big ask for people to buy, because not only it was like, even though the setting was well known, the format was not well known. So people were asking, why should I buy this $70 box set? And I thought, it would be a good idea if I came up with something less expensive, so people could see the format, play it with something interesting, and then if they like it, then they can buy the box set. And I pitched it. I worked with Joseph Goodman and on a Judges Guild reprint, not a reprint project, a reimagining project where we took three Judgesville modules and reimagined them for 3.5. I wrote Thieves of Madagascar. We also did Dark Tower and Citadel of Fire. So when that wound down, I pitched this idea to him, showed him an example setting, and he said, sure. So what it consists of? It consists of four settings. Each has a one-page map. Each covers an area about 125 by 75 miles, and I would key them up just like a Judges Guild product. And the first one, and so for the first one, I decided to make it a homage to the outdoor survival map and call it Southland, because the original outdoor survival map was put to the south of Dave Aronson Blackmore, where Dave Aronson had Castle Blackmore. So I made it. That's why I named it, and it's a frontier, and there's a kingdom trying to expand in its area, and there's places to explore. Then the next setting I called Waterland, which takes place in a region that was once a province of the Bright Empire, this world's equivalent of the Roman Empire. And this is a couple decades after their fall. Barbarians hold most of the territory. There are a few outposts of civilization. The players are meant to have adventures and find their way and hopefully restore some of what was lost. And then the third one is called Borderlands, and that took place during the Civil War that led to the collapse of the Bright Empire. And it features two opposing sides plus some neutral forces that the players can deal with. And the last one's a little different than the other three. It took place on. It was an outer plane setting. It took place on the home plane of the dark god Sarath, who's the dragon god of war and order, and who is mentioned in the other lands that I wrote about. So once the characters get a little higher level, they had something further they can adventure to. So Joseph Goodman we were looking. We kind of did this as part of the run up for fourth edition, and Joseph Goodman was looking at some various fourth edition marketing material by Wizards of the Coast, and he noticed Points of Light. I pulled up the trademark database and noticed that Wizards of the Coast had a lot of the 4E terms that they would use, like Nenter's Veil and stuff, trademark, but they did not trademark Points of Light. So Joseph said, I'm going to pick Points of Light. And now he owns the trademark to that. I have the copyright to the actual settings and maps themselves, but he owns the series name, so to speak.
So you never
they
actually.
sold
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well, they sold okay enough to warrant a second one, which I did in the theme of the exploring the new world. So I have three settings in there about exploring the new world, and a fourth setting that is an outer plane adventure as well.
Awesome. Did you? So you say you almost pretty much only run in the wildlands or wilder lands. So you never actually ran anything in those settings. You just wrote them.
Yes,
Have you ever
but
heard? Oh.
I will say, okay, so
It's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it.
no, but I pride myself on eating my own dog food, so to speak. So what those were was I had no expectations of, even though I worked on Judges Guild material, I didn't have a license. Either Goodman Games had a license, Necromancer Games had a license.
Yeah.
I did not have a license, nor did I feel established enough to ask for a license.
Mm-hmm.
Because Goodman Games, Necromancer Games, they were by that time they were pretty much settled companies with a big catalog and you know stable of artists and authors. And so I was since by the mid '90s, pretty much my Majestic Waterlands were just the only thing common it had with the original Judges Guild was the geography and the names. Okay, I had an
Mm-hmm.
overlord, I had a city state, I had a Bernistan that once had a world emperor. So I had those, but what they meant in my setting was different. So what I was working on was making a version with the serial number, Judges Guild serial numbers filed off,
Mm-hmm.
and those points of light was the start of that. So after that series wound down, I was gonna go whole hog into that and write it up like other people write up their settings and continue my points of light. What I was doing in points of light under a different name. At first, it was going to be Land of Adventure. Now I call it the Majestic Fantasy Realm. And so everything I did in the Majestic Waterlands was being placed in there. So while I didn't play those specifically, like Sarath is the god Set. Delaquain, who I mentioned, is the goddess Mitra. You know, Veritas, that name remained unchanged. All the themes in there, the conflicts, all of those I have were featured at various parts of my campaign. So
Awesome.
it's played but not played. It's in that in between area. But then I got the license, so that saved me a lot of work, so I could
No.
focus on more other things. So that fell by the wayside, only to appear in Black Marsh.
All right. Awesome. Good story. So, what about usually I talk about how I know my guest. I know you through Tim. Obviously, he talks about you a lot when I game with him, and pretty much Google Pluses. Is there any other way that I'm forgetting? I've never seen you at a con or anything, I don't think.
No, I only attend local cons. I got two kids, a full-time job, so I just don't have the opportunity to head out to Gary Con or North Texas Con as much as I would like to. So I'm pretty much local to. There's sometimes things in Erie and sometimes things in Cleveland and Akron. So that's where you'll find me,
That sounds
and that's
cool.
where I've done my. Yeah, Con and the
Awesome.
Cobb is the main one.
I thought that was in Minneapolis.
Con
No?
and the Cobb?
Well, that's kind of the north, maybe. It would be weird for him to.
Con and the Cobb is Akron.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe I'll hit that one time, and maybe I'll see you there. So,
Yeah.
you do play. You don't just write. You told me that all those books back there were like your current books behind you over your shoulder. What have you
Yeah.
played in the last week or two?
I'm in 2 campaigns, both 5th edition. One, I wound up a campaign I was running last fall. So I decided to take a break from referee, and I'm playing in 2 of my friends' campaign. One is 5th edition, uh, the Salt Marsh adventure that Wizards
Mm-hmm.
recently put out. I'm playing a druid of the coast in there, and then the other one I'm playing uh, Descent into Avernus. And I played a halfling monk who got killed, went out with a bang though, and then now I'm playing a bard, but I'm not a magician. I'm an orator, and so we're about to wrap up, and I'm probably going to spin up a game of my own. My player's been asking me to return some of it to a thing I ran a while back that they want to finish out,
All right, cool. So,
and that will be
what?
with
Oh,
swords and wizardry.
all right, nice. So, I should say that I didn't get into any of the Dungeon Musings games that I usually play, second edition D&D. One being the Night Below campaign, and the other Legacy of the Crystal Shard. I didn't get any of those this week, but I did run my Kalmata game, which uses old school essentials. 1 or 2 sessions, maybe. We had a Midlands game in there, which uses low fantasy gaming, and Days of Lyncium, which I run on Sunday mornings, which people in the stream are well aware of because they were watching. But yeah, those are
Oh,
pretty cool games. Hey, have you ever heard
what
of?
Age of Lithium? I haven't heard of that.
Oh, that's my own thing, but
Oh,
I used this product as a base. If you've ever seen this product, Evils of
ah,
Ilmire
hmm.
by Spellsword. It came out in the last quest, thing, or Zine Quest on Kickstarter. It was one of those, and it just fulfilled. I mean, I just got this, but I had the backer PDF previously. It's Days of Lyncium is part of my setting, which is called the Emergent Empires, that I run almost all my stuff and that's what I've been doing probably for 5 or 6 years. So actually,
Well, keep
probably.
at it, and you'll have more details, and you know what to do at it. Especially if you get to run it for 10, 15 years straight.
I already do because I run it in so many different ways, with so many different people and different systems and everything. So, all right. So the last part of this introduction we got going on here, Rob, is called "Everything About You." I don't know if you listen to this podcast at all, but this this segment's based on Ugly Kid Joe's song "I Hate Everything About You." That's just kind of a joke, really. But so you just just share something about yourself that the listeners or your fans or anybody else don't really know. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Uh, well, I'm a computer programmer that works with metal cutting machines, and I got just done with a project writing the control software for a laser that will burn your eyes out in a millisecond if you don't follow all of the safety precautions. And
What's the laser for?
well, it's imagine a flat table with a bridge over it, and on the bridge is what we call a carriage that has the laser cutter pointed straight down, and you put a plate of metal on it, and the software you program the pattern,
So like a
and
die cut or
it will.
something?
Yeah,
I don't know
different
anything
cutting
about machining.
mechanism. Well, it's not. It's not. It's if you see a square on the screen and tell it to cut it, it will cut out a square. So if you see like a, a square with a rounded end and tell it to cut it, it will cut a square with a rounded end.
How thick
And
of metal can that thing go through?
this particular model can go up to 3/4 inch.
All right. So that's a
But we sell machines that use a different type of cutter called a plasma cutter that can go up to 3 inches thick.
yeah, that's using plasma, not a laser. I was just curious how close we're getting to shooting laser guns at each other. That's all. Other than just at eyes, I mean, or making your cat chase it.
Well, the power unit's the size of half the size of your kitchen refrigerator, so we're
Oh,
not quite there in that department. But yes, that thing will shoot across the room and it will lay some hurt on. And if it gets in your eyes are done.
wow. All right.
Yeah,
So
so
last episode, I talked how I had kind of been getting interested in sports again. Well, that was 2 weeks ago. The Blackhawks are out of the playoffs, and who cares about sports? That's my that's my new thing today. In this set, I also wanted to mention that I started a new Discord channel called the Gamerhood. I'll still be hanging out at the Audio Dungeon Discord if anyone wants to see me. But if you want to find all things Hobbs and Friends or the Gamerhood, go to the Gamerhood Discord. And then this Saturday, we are running a charity 4-hour game of low fantasy gaming with the author and publisher of Low Fantasy Gaming, Steve Grodzicki, the Dungeon Muser himself, Kevin Madison, Sean P. Kelly from Gaming and BS, and Brian in the park. Brian is the guy who donated money originally to get this game going, and we're going to try to make some money for Hero Save Villages, which is a charity which helps kids all over the world to get the best home that they possibly could. So it's Children Save Villages is the charity. Our particular charity drive is called Hero Save Villages, and that's all done by Kevin Madison, and you can find a link in the show notes. That'll be 4 p.m. It'll be here on my Twitch or also at the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. All right, my man, it's time for the main topic, which you kind of went into in the introduction, talking about the wildlands. So I've heard so many different aspects of what in the wildlands are. I mean, the city state of the Invincible Overlord, and then the wildlands was like the outdoor area. How long has that thing been around? And you kind of mentioned some of your stuff that you were involved in. Can you kind of maybe dive into that a little more?
Sure.
How long has it been that you've been doing it, and when did the city state? I remember that CSIO coming out, I think. Go for it.
Well, it was originally started in 1976 when Bob Bledsaw drew a map of the city-state of the Invincible Overlord, and him and Bill Owens had an idea that they could have sell subscriptions to a packet for a quarterly, I think it was quarterly packet of referee aids. And they went to that year's Gen Con and sold maps of city-state out of their trunk of their back car. And they got subscription orders, and from that, Judges Guild was founded. And then so when they went back and started fulfilling the subscription orders, they started fleshing out the city with some details and some charts, like a city encounter chart, random rumors, and so forth and so on. And then eventually they started detailing the world around the city-state and the Invincible Overlord. And the way they did it was, they were like the first guys to really do this. So what the format they decided to do it on was to take a numbered hex grid, and that would have been, and draw a section of the waterlands on it. And they started with, of course, the area around city-state, which is that map right there. And then they put villages on the map, and then they fleshed out. So they put villages. Then they in the text they list out the village, who lived there, what the population, who lived there, and who their leaders were. And then they detailed out ruins. Then they detailed lairs, and then they give a short 1 to 2 to 3 sentence description of the island that were present. And then they had this area of 18 maps in a 3 by 6 grid, and they did that for all 18 maps. And by the time 1980, they had released it all. And so compared to, I mean, Greyhawk was awesome, but Greyhawk, said this is the kingdom of Nyrod, and Nyrod was dozens of 30-mile hexes inside, and there was very little detail what was contained in there. Just like a Folders. I don't know if you remember the Folders travel guides, but it was like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but with the Waterland, it was like a bottom up thing where it told you what was there, what villages were there, what monsters were lurking by, what ruins were there to explore, but it was relatively thin on the high level details. So you had the city state, you have the city state of the World Emperor, maybe Modron, but there was not a lot. That was it. So you were free to impose any kind of thing you wanted. So between what my players did and what I came up with, it slowly morphed into a different setting altogether. So Judges Guild then, and in the early '80s, Judges Guild lost their D&D license. They tried to make a go out of it with this sort of generic fantasy setup, and that didn't really work out. And unfortunately, by 1984, they were all but shut down. And the whole idea of a hex crawl formatted setting just fell by the wayside in favor of either you had a map with maybe 24 numbers on it that you looked up,
Mm-hmm.
or a travelogue format like Greyhawk and then later Forgotten Realms.
Mystara,
Uh, and
Gazetteers.
then, of course, with the advent of 3.0 and the open game license, suddenly everybody was interested in trying their hand at publishing, and this included people like Clark Peterson and Bill Webb of Necromancer Games, who liked the old style stuff. So they started pushing, you know, new edition rules with old school feel, and then looking up Bob Bloodsaw and they got the right to publish Judges Guild.
When
So that kind of
when
sorry,
about
go on.
was that? I was just going to ask. You think the Necromancer Games started doing that?
When did they start doing that?
Yeah, was that 2008? 2000 before that probably.
No, 2003.
2003. Okay. Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
when
been
the first
17 years ago
project
already.
first come together, and I think they released it 2004, 2005. I don't have it in front of me, but it was in the middle aughts. It was right around the time 3.5 debuted.
All right. So that is crazy. And so then that's when you were working on it. And what was that? That was called The Majestic Wildlands by Necromancer Games?
No, it was the Waterlands of High Fantasy.
Oh, okay. Wildlands of High Fantasy. So what's the
It
Majestic
was a box
Wildlands?
set.
Okay. And how, hey,
Well,
that's
that
what
that's
I was going to ask you this. You mentioned that. How much is that box set now if you try to get it? Any
250
idea?
bucks.
Huh?
$250.
Oh,
$250.
that's high, but not too crazy, I guess. I wonder how many they put out because it sounds kind of super cool.
Uh,
If
2000
Okay,
maybe. It was
that's
it
not that
was not a
many.
big print run.
No. So how many different editions of the Wildlands have been put out, and then like how many of them have you actually been involved in?
I would say there've been 3 editions, and I've been involved in 2. The
Okay.
Necromancer box set. I did the villages for map for 2.5 maps. 2 maps. Remember, there's 18 of these guys.
Yes.
Well, I did the village, not the lairs, not the ruins or the islands, but the villages and castles for this one, and the map to the south of it, and then part of the map below that. Uh, and then the 3rd edition, so to speak, is the one that I recently released because, unfortunately, the Judges Guild Kickstarter fell apart, and I was only paid for half of the 18 maps that I made for this, and I had them all done. I see what I
Mm-hmm.
did was I didn't draw them as 18 separate maps. I drew them as one huge 5 foot wide, 8 foot high map,
How did you
and
do
then I
that?
just using CorelDRAW and
Oh.
16 gigs of RAM. And trust me, that file takes a while to load. And
Yeah.
so I did it all basically. I do all the coast and all the forest and all the villages. Basically did everything. So when when they ran out of money and said to halt work, I was basically done. I just
Mm.
had to double check what I did, and then the only other step was to crop out the individual 18 maps so you get what you see there. So I was only paid for half of that, and so when Bob Bloodsaw the second son, Bob Bloodsaw the third, stepped down and his dad took it over again. Um, I said, look, if you allow me to sell. Well, first I asked, can I sell the City State of the Invincible Overlord map I made? Because they didn't pay that for me at all. And he
Mm-hmm.
said yes. And then I that told well, but it had no book with it. I said, hey, can I sell my Waterland map? But I think I could have had more sales if I had a book to sell with it. Now I know the City State book is what your Kickstarter, and you're working on that. But can I sell a version of the guidebook? And he said yes. So I've done all 18 maps now in 4 guidebooks. So that is effectively comprised the third edition. And basically, I tried to incorporate all the errata and correction that we accumulated from the box set and that came up on the internet, among fans of the Waterland that we knew about. So it's probably the most accurate version of the Waterland that is out there now, and it's still
Awesome.
available.
Yeah. And that's where you would get it on drive-through?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm only about. So in order to pay me for what he owed me, he said to defer his royalties, and so I'm only 52% of the way to what he owes me.
Wow.
So and that's a jump from 3 months ago of 48%. So every quarter it's probably going up another 4%. So it's going to
Yeah.
be up there for probably until the end of 2021. And
Everyone
if you
go out
buy
and
one,
buy that.
and none of the money is going to uh, Bob Bloodsaw the second.
That's a good point right there. Do you want to talk any more about what your relationship with the Bloodsaws are or any of that? Because I mean, some people probably don't necessarily know
He's a
exactly what's
polite
going on.
guy, a nice man, but he's a racist and anti-Semitic, and as his post illustrates. And I had a chat with him before I said anything, and I just can't work with the guy.
Yeah, that's crazy. You
I
never
just
really
won't work
know.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move away from that. I think maybe briefly. I always get confused. What is Black Marsh then?
Well, Black Marsh is the continuation of the Points of Light setting.
Okay,
And
so
specifically, it's set to the north of Southland, which was a part of the first
Points of
Points
Light.
of Light book.
Okay. And that's your
And
own thing, because I have a Black Marsh map, and I don't even know where I got it. I think I bought it at a con once from Taco John or something for Goodman Games from Black Blade Publishing. So
yeah, Black Blade carries my stuff, the physical products at conventions. Every year they tell me what they could think they can sell, and I order that, package it up nicely, and send it to them. So yeah, so that is a continuation of that setting, and I was actually going to continue that. I am going to still continue
okay,
that, but I work on multiple things. So the 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 sequel to Black Marsh is going to be the Wild North, which is a Slavic mythology themed setting that is set to the north of Black Marsh, and so that probably will come out in the fall. I got all the writing done. I just got to work on some of the smaller maps that are part of the product. And but now it's looking like that's going to be my main setting. So I earlier mentioned that I worked on a serial number a version of the Majestic Waterlands with the serial numbers Judges Guild serial numbers filed off. Well,
mm-hmm.
I'm back to working on that. And
Oh,
the Wild North is going to be the first product in that That one. So what I hope to do is alternate one of my rule supplement with one of my setting supplements like Wild North, and have a few ideas for other ones.
Awesome. So I'm going to save this hex crawling question for you for the post show. So if any of the listeners
Okay.
want to hear it, you're going to have to go to YouTube or Twitch and listen. And move on to this next question, which is from Jason Connerly. He mentioned that he heard you on Tenkar and you were talking about having a DM advice book or something coming out. Does that sound accurate? Don't go into it. Just say yes or no. Like GM advice.
Parts of it are going to be part of my kick.
That's when you talked about earlier on how to run it. Perfect. What do you think about advice for players? You don't see a lot of things that are really just advice for players, right? And I think all of us could be better players than we are. What do you think about that?
My advice, well, that's a good question. My advice is,
oh, dang. It looks like we lost him. Nope,
you sent
he's
me
back.
to the box, man.
All right.
I'm back.
It went to the box after 5 minutes? Weird. All right, so on the Gamerhood, I should say
I would
quickly.
say it's more like a half hour, but
Oh,
I'd
wow.
say.
Anyway, sorry. So you were going to
All
say
right,
about player
so-
advice.
Okay, so my advice is it's actually kind of simple. You know, make up a character. You don't have to act like a different personality. It just can be a version of yourself. But what I ask, the only thing I ask to my players is act as if you are there as the character.
Yeah, I
Okay?
think that's the
I will
flail
paint a
snail
picture.
thing. Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
will paint a picture of where you at, who you seeing, and just act like you're there and tell me what you do. And like for example, you know, if a guy wants to buy something, I'll role play the shopkeep. And so all the player really has to do is, you know, look me in the eye and respond like he's there, trying to buy a sword or or trying to sell some treasure. And everything else is basically, I would call good sportsmanship. Be a good sportsman when with your DM and with your group. You know, and sportsmanship is basically good manners while you engage in some sort of competitive play. Even though role playing is not quite competitive, but you're still trying to fight monsters and survive, so it has elements of that.
Oh, I'm going to have to share this link right to one of my buddies on Twitter. He's all about D&D being competitive play. But let's move on from that. This is a new segment of the show where I ask the guest to choose either your legacy in the old school scene or your epitaph in the old school scene. What would you want it to be? Which one do you want to pick, and then what would they be?
My legacy in the old school theme.
Yeah, what would you want that legacy to be? I mean, you've already created it, really, haven't you? Finishing the Judges Guild stuff in a way that...
What's that? Sandbox fantasy. You know, how to run a sandbox fantasy campaign. That's what I want my legacy to be. As far as my epitaph, I would say I'm the referee who lets his players trash his campaign.
Nice.
That's the foundation. That's what set me on the path in 1982. I'm the guy who let their players become a king. It wasn't easy. It was a challenge. But if they had the plan and they followed through and with a little bit of luck, I had no problem with them being king. Or a boss, underworld boss, or head of the Mages Guild, or whatever. Whatever they want to do, I was willing to roll with, and I'm still willing to roll with.
Nice. All right, so I'm going to have to move on now to the outro where we give some appreciation to the listeners of the show and those who are involved with my Patreon. So here's some shout outs. Vance A. I get to play some games with Vance and Tim Short sometimes, and Matt Jackson's game once in a while. So Vance, thank you very much for being a patron. Joe Salvador. He does the Call of Cthulhu game using Swords and Wizardry White Box. I can't think of what the name of it is. Do you know, Rob? No?
Can you repeat that one more time? I am hard of hearing. So
Oh, his name's Joe Salvador. He does like a Call of Cthulhu based Swords and Wizardry white box product. Eldritch Tales or something? I don't know. Regardless, Joe,
Oh,
thank you.
I only heard that briefly, but I thought so that's good for him. Good that he's working in Call of Cthulhu with classic edition material,
Yeah,
mechanics, because
it's
we
awesome.
need more variety.
I agree. So thank you for being a patron, Joe Salvador. Last but not least, Maltworm himself, Stu Clark, the third shout out today. Thanks, my man, for being a patron. At this time, I'm going to say the music for Hobbs and Friends has been provided by T.J. Drennan, and you can get some music for your podcast if you want. And that's his Patreon. I have no idea what it's called. Just search for Super Awesome TJ, and I'm pretty sure it'll show up. So do you have a Twitter or anything? If someone wanted to talk to you about your majestic Wilderlands, how would they get in touch with you, Rob?
The best place is comments on my blog. I'm on MeWe and I'm on Robert Conley on Facebook. Just go to Tenkar's Tavern or Swords and Wizardry or the Wilderlands, and there will be posts with my name on it. So you can just click there and send me a message if you can stand Facebook, which I can barely tolerate.
Well, it's still better than Twitter.
I monitor my comments on my blog, so.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. If you want to get in touch with me, you can always reach me at the email hnfhobbs@gmail.com. I'm also on the Twitters. The podcast has its own Twitter. It's at OSRNHobbs. And my private one is at Hobbs Indeed. It's almost impossible to keep your stuff private, and so it's all kind of mixed in there. Feel free to follow whichever one you want. And tag me.
Well, if you want to email, I have Robert S. Conley, CONLEY @battentheattic.com.
So I misspelled Conley everywhere, and you never said it. This whole show, we've had your name misspelled. I thought that I saw your name it was just that way. God, I'm so.
Yeah, CONLEY.
I'm so ashamed.
I don't know. My screen is littered with so many. Oh, I see what you did. Okay, yeah, you forgot the E.
I purposely didn't put it in there. But I will fix that on anything coming out after this. Twitchers, you saw it here. Another mistake from Hobbs. And if you want to be a patron like those other guys, go to www.patreon.com/OSRN Hobbs. You got a patron? You don't have a Patreon, do you? No. But tons of products out there. Go buy those products and get him disconnected from Judges Guild, people. Let's go. Get your money, my man. Get your money. So like I said, Audio Dungeon Discord or the Gamerhood Discord. Rob, I really appreciate you being on the show. Do you you got any last comments or anything?
Well, one, thanks for having me. No, I write about a lot of stuff, give a lot of advice, but it's always this: take what you like, make it your own, but have fun. That's the whole point of it.
There you go, people. Do what he said. Stay alive. You know you got a job to do. And we will catch you in 2 weeks. All right, Rob. So the podcast is done, but we are in the after show here. I don't even know who's left. We had some people. My man VC, Sean, P. Kelly was here. Looks like they're still here. No one asked any specific questions, but I would like to hear, briefly, maybe in a couple minutes, if it would be possible, for you to tell us the Bat in the Attic way of doing a sandbox campaign.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So basically, the sandbox campaign, what most people have in the vision of it is you put the players in the middle of a blank hex map and say, go forth and explore. And that's a rather niche taste. Just like, somebody who wants to play GURPS with all the options. There are people who do that, have fun with that, but let's face it, that's not a popular thing to do. And so it can be done, but likely your group is not going to like it. But what I have found much more success among my hardcore players and my more casual players is that I try to put them in an interesting situation. I do this by first talking to them beforehand about what kind of characters they want to play, and from that I listen to them, and we have a dialogue before the campaign even starts about, like, somebody would say, I want to be a knight. Okay, well, how about this guy? Do you like to be a knight of this person or you this person? And I give them a couple choices, possibilities, and usually we come up with something. They pick one or two elements, and then we make the rest up in our dialogue. So I do this for each of the player. Then I create a situation, find a place in my majestic waterlands, uh, find a couple places actually, and then I get the players of the group and say, how does this sound for starting out as your characters? How does this sound starting about the characters? So eventually they'll pick a spot. So from there, I paint a picture of what it is, what's going on there right now, and I try to put at least one rumor, something that one player expressed that they're interested. So maybe a mage, the guy playing a mage said he wants to play a explore ruins looking for lost spells or something. So I'll put a hook in for that. And another player says, I just want gold. So I'll make sure there's a way they can find a treasure map or a rumor to a place where there was a ancient buried treasure in somebody's tomb or something. And then from there, though, and then I detail what's around them, with the locale, the location, the people who inhabit them, and then I'll pick and I'm only trying to do a handful at each time because I'm doing this in my spare time. So, and then I pick a handful of these characters that I created and create, well, what are their goals? What are they doing if the players weren't there at all? And I try to come up with something that would create complications for the players as they pursue their own goals. So when the campaign starts, I paint them the picture of where they are, and they tell me what they're going to do. And one thing you got to remember, that the setting has a life of its own. So it's just not standing in a town square looking around. They people will come to them and see, they're going to, first of all, they're going to be wealthy by the standards of just about any village. Not super rich, but they're going to have gear. So they're obviously, they're ahead of the game in that department. So, so I will try, either the players will be self-directed, which is great, or they're nervous about what doing, in which case, one or two of the NPCs will interact with them, and they'll pick up on that and start their adventure. And then at every step of the way, I try to play it like sort of like a virtual reality, where I'm running these characters, and in this part, I know it's frustrating vague, but everything they do has a consequence, and they act on those consequences, which build further consequences, and that's what propels the campaign forward. And the best way I can explain this is through an abbreviated description of one of a campaign. The players started out as a group of mercenaries. They decided they wanted to be mercenaries, explore the mercenary life. So I gave them a couple of choices. They opted to be in the employ of a baron on the frontier of a kingdom. So they did that for a while, and they're starting to unravel what was going on the frontiers. They had some challenge, chased down some bandits. There were some rebels from a neighboring kingdom, and then they found a treasure hoard as part of it, a long-forgotten cache of treasure, and it was substantial wealth. Not enough to retire on, but now they had options. And one of the players decided to say, hey, we can pay off our contract because there was a penalty if you quit early. we can pay off a contract and we can go to this other frontier of the uh, campaign where they're having trouble with Vikings, and we can join that fight. And he got all the other players to agree. So all that work I did detailing the frontiers and stuff, that they just dropped that because one player persuaded the group to go there. So they went there, and so they hooked up. They said they were a mercenary band looking for employment. They got hired because the Baron wasn't happy to see them go, but they treated him right by paying off his contract. So he was happy to give them a recommendation. And so they started. So they were assigned an area to patrol and raid Viking settlements. And so one of the things I put out there was that if they were smart, they could figure out where the Viking king was doing, what he was doing. And they did. They figured it out, and they set up an ambush for the Viking king, and they bagged him. It was a brilliant fight, very tough fight, but they bagged him and brought him back, and they sold his ransom to the king of the realm that they were fighting for. And with the money, they decided, okay, we're going to retire. But they wanted to play out the retirement. So what they decided as a group was to build an inn. And they looked at the map of the kingdom and they say, this crossroad has a lot of traffic. And they only briefly been there, but they know, they had a lot of traffic. If we build an inn there, it will bring in some money. But unfortunately, it's next to a place called the Plain of Cairns, which is filled with burrows, filled with undead, and it wasn't a particularly safe area. So the last part of the campaign was the players trying to get their inn built and trying to clear out the cairns so it was safe enough that they wouldn't wake up one night with with the zombie apocalypse surrounding their inn and burning it down. And that's where the campaign ended, when they found out why there were undead in the burrow, and they had an epic fight with a creature, a lich, which there were still dangers in the cairns, but it wasn't like before, and they could get their and they built their inn. So that's a sample, and each of these three major phases, working for the Baron, raiding Vikings on the frontier, and building the inn. I did not foresee this. This was all by the direction of the players. But because of the way I prepared things, I had a list of specific things, and I had a list of what I call my bag of stuff, generic things. Like, I have some bartenders that I could role play and just say, okay, here's a bartender. And then if I need to, I can detail that. I can, after the session, if the players really like the bartender or are going to go back to the bartender, then I'll make a proper character out of them. But that way, I was always one step ahead of the players as we went through the campaign. So that's what a sandbox campaign is like. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, decent. I was also curious, like, do you populate the hexes themselves, like territory-wise, or do you just kind of wing it, or do you have a process? Do you use like Goblin Henchman's Lotus Leaf? Do you use Welsh Pipers, Encounters, Atlas hexes versus, subsystem hexes, or what's your process?
My process is to draw a map, and I wouldn't say divide it into region, but when you draw a map and populate with geography, you'll see the regions that appear, and then I make a gazetteer, what goes in each region. And because the problem with doing it hex by hex is that if you take an area that's if you make a map that, say, 50 by 25 miles and then try to expand that to 100 by 50 miles, it's not just 4 times the work. It's like 8 times the work. It expanded at a greater rate because of all the interconnection. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I would make up an area, and then I would populate it with what I call notes. and then I would use some of the resources that you mentioned to random because I usually have like maybe 3 dozen things in a large region that I want to detail, but I only have firm ideas for a dozen of them. So for the other 24, I have a variety of random tables I use as idea generators in order to populate them.
So did you write these random tables, or have you used them from someone else? Have you ever published the random tables, or?
I have a handful I wrote, but most of them are from other people.
Okay.
Uh, uh, yeah, I don't have access to my random. I use a program called Inspiration Pad Pro.
Mm-hmm.
It's free from Emboss, and since I'm a programmer, I know how they write their programs, or their random tables. So anytime I see a good random table, like for NPC, I use a combination of the first edition DMG and Pathfinder's a set of NPC personality tables from Pathfinder's Game Mastery Guide, and I made this unholy, stat block of NPC personality, and I don't really use it at what it shows on my screen, but it's usually enough there that I can say, "Oh yeah, that gives me an idea." So that those are the type of random tables I collect. I use for cities, I use a product from Akemia Press called the City Book.
There's a bunch
I
of those, right?
Yeah. No. That's from those are Grim Tooth, not Grim Tooth, but those are from Flying Buffalo.
Oh, okay. Yep, you're right. I know
This
what you're
is from
talking about.
This is like a
Midkemia Press.
random
Yeah.
table for scene. It's got multiple levels of tables, and it's pretty thorough. Uh,
So, do you normally run in fifth edition now? It sounds like you use Pathfinder a lot and 3.5, or are you really more of an old school guy and you're using mostly Swords and Wizardry and OSE, or are you using this system that you're kind of making up for your new product? You're going to run a new game soon. What system are you going to use?
I'm going to use Swords and Wizardry as modified by my uh, Majestic Waterlands house rules,
Okay,
or
so
what I'm calling now Majestic Fantasy uh, house rules.
what?
So, so the
I was going to
Kickstarter,
go ahead.
the rules I'm publishing for the Kickstarter are the latest version of those rules, and they're 100% compatible with Swords and Wizardry
Is which Swords and Wizardry?
core. But yeah, core. I work based off of Swords and Wizardry core.
So is that kind of the AD&D-ish one, or with race and class? Because it's
That's
not
the
white
middle one.
box. The middle one, yeah. Okay, core,
The
complete,
middle
and
one.
white box, right?
Yeah, core is white box plus selected material from the Greyhawk and later supplements.
Okay,
For
nice.
example, it has ninth level spells. It has the thief class. It has some of the more wider range of magic items than white box.
Which book is that? If you wanted to go and buy Swords and Wizardry core, can you even? It's just a free. That's just a free PDF now, or what? What is that? Because all I think of is like the complete is
Swords and
all I
Wizards.
can think of.
Good question. Well, they got rid of the Swords and Wizardry website, so
And if you don't know it, it's fine. I remember there being three versions, but I don't. I think most people I talk to all use they either play white box or they use complete. They don't really say core very often. So that was interesting that you
well,
said
Frog
that.
Gods de-emphasize core.
Yeah.
You can still get core on. Hold on. You can still get core on Drive Through RPG.
Okay. Interesting.
It's
I'm
the
I'm sure
fourth
I.
printing of Sword.
That's pretty cool. All right, man. I know that you had a time that you would like to wrap up, and it's not like we got a bunch of super chatty chats on the channel. I just wanted to record that when you talked about it so people could see how other people run sandbox games, because I talk about them all the time. And what you say isn't that much different than what I do, but everyone has their own process, So I really appreciate you being
Yeah,
on.
I'm gonna. Well, thank you. Yeah, like I'm working on these rules supplement, and they're gonna, there's gonna be a referee one where I'm gonna get in depth about all this stuff, and really think about the tools I use, and try to come up with some concrete aids so that so they help people with their campaign.
That sounds really good. So I guess we are going to call it a night here at the Gamerhood, and hopefully this show will come out by Thursday. It all depends on my new editor, Rich. So shout out to Rich. Once again, thank you so much for being here, my man. And
No
all you
problem.
guys out there in the internet world, we will see you next time.